social digital campaigns and influencer marketing efforts, guiding overall brand marketing and growth strategy across beauty, fashion, travel, and spirits. Prior to her current role, running global digital and content strategy at Calvin Klein Fragrances, she's worked at leading beauty brands such as Urban Decay, Bare Minerals, heading up digital and social media efforts, as well as building creative social media strategy campaigns for Bacardi Spirits portfolio, Estee Lauder companies, and travel campaigns for United States during her stint on the agency side. Our moderator will be Keith Podvesker, who is a general manager at US Adverity. I hopefully got that correct. But welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. I think for some lunchtime chat. So I will pass it over to you.
Sounds good to me. Great, thank you very much, Tyler, and thank you, Nilu, for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah. Well, this holiday season is shaping up to be quite different than the last holiday season. Last holiday, we were very much at home, isolated. People couldn't travel. People couldn't get together. There were no holiday parties outside of, people shaking their glasses on Zoom. And now people are really looking forward to getting together. And I think with Delta on the wane in many parts of the country, we're going to see even more travel and possibly even more in-store purchases. I'm curious. With changes in consumer behavior and tactic and purchasing habits, how have you and the team sort of adjusted your strategies and tactics to these new dynamics?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple of different ways that we've been looking at our specific holiday strategy as a whole. First and foremost, we know e-commerce has had tremendous growth over the last year or two. We also know that traditional retailers have really heavily invested in accelerating their e-commerce offerings, brick and mortar, plans from an omni-channel experience as well have all been accelerated. So for us, better partnering with these retailers, with our platform partners, with our data partners to better understand our audiences and our consumers, new and prospective, understanding their shopping habits, where they're going, what they're shopping for, and how they're doing it, have really been sort of the key. And what that really means is we know, especially for holiday, people are starting to shop more and more now. I think Google reported that 31% of people are shopping earlier and earlier. And we know a lot of brands have already started to launch their holiday campaigns and that holiday messaging. So some of those old ways, if you will, of thinking holidays confined to this exact time period is really no longer valid. Going into store and shopping is no longer sort of the only option. I obviously work on a fragrance business where you do need that sort of storytelling and romanticizing of the product a little bit, right? Like you want people to go in, feel the bottle, touch that fragrance and smell it and really kind of go along that journey. So for us, it's been creating experiences that really bridge the gap between the in-person physical retail space and world and connecting that with the digital world. So really bringing that virtual space and kind of creating that hybrid model. So we've expanded and looked at various different virtual experiences that also have a connection in store. We've connected different digital experiences, opportunities for people to connect through QR codes or smart sampling in store as well as online, and kind of like creating that bridge. And I think the other thing is also diversifying your message, right?
Right.
Because we know there's definitely challenges in the supply chain and sort of getting shipments out there. There's challenges on labor. So how can we better communicate? How can we accelerate our customer service? How can we also provide more incentives so people are engaged and coming on a journey with us and staying closer and having that connection to the brand. people, I think, tend to shop from a brand that they have initially had that they've initially been considering. So it's really about inspiring that undecided group of people. And I think, there's a lot of data out there. So it's typically about 88% that are like undecided, but they always gravitate towards those brands that they're really familiar with.
Sure. And
Calvin Klein, as you know, is a very household name. So how do we continue to build on that journey? And then just from a content perspective too, we've really paid a lot of attention to what consumers are interested in, especially after 2020, right? Consumers are much more keen on sort of investing, not just their time and energy, but of course their dollars as well, with brands that align on their personal values. So accelerating our sustainability offerings, and then also creating conversations and campaigns that really represent the community that is shopping, and looking at various different diverse messaging, giving a platform and creating authentic stories that represent these consumers. And we've done that through so many different campaigns on a fashion level, as well as on a fragrance level. Our most recent campaign, where we launched a brand new male fragrance, which is the Calvin Klein Defy fragrance. It's really about representing and reaching like the millennial male and female community, and kind of giving them a platform to speak their mind, and talking about, what are they defying? How are they navigating this really challenging times in their lives? And so really like paying attention to what's happening in the culture and in the world right now, and being able to tell those stories in an authentic way also helps fuel not just holiday, but of course that long-term relationship. So there's so many different ways that we've been accelerating our business from a D2C e-commerce perspective, storytelling, creative perspective, and then of course engaging with consumers and our creator communities as well.
I think that's a remarkable story of digital transformation of the brand end to end. And you mentioned already so many great insights that have turned into action. Consumers purchasing earlier, how they're making purchases, how they're engaging with the brand online, that they're opening up and telling more stories, all in sort of this digital addressable format. So it means there's a whole lot of data coming in, so many great things for you guys to learn and then act upon. I'm curious, the relationship between brands like yours and channel partners, say big department stores, has pretty much been exactly the same for probably about 40 or 50 years. But it sounds like that's really changed a lot and accelerated over the past year alone. Tell me, how is all this goodness of data analytics, leveraging digital channels, both in terms of being able to purchase, as well as for consumers being able to have a dialogue with that brand? How are these things sort of change your relationship with your channel partners?
I think it's a lot of what I mentioned before. I think big retailers are also investing heavily in their e-commerce offerings and have accelerated that, especially this past year or two. So they're really competing with some of those digital natives. And so it's been helpful for me trying to, as you said, transform digital for the brand. And in general, throughout my career, it's been very fulfilling to be able to kind of now work through some of those shifts and better partner in bridging that like omni-channel experiences. We've really been able to accelerate. For example, we did this pilot with smart sampling, right? Where you can send people samples to your home based on their preferences. And then you can then send them to either purchase in store or online. And so these are like unboxing moments that also create additional content that also now builds advocacy. It builds like your micro influencer community. So there's a lot of different ways to sort of bridge all of these things together. We've developed various different virtual stores, even from a tactical standpoint, like how do you create more engaging and personalized content that also lives on your retailer site, right? Especially for fragrance, it's a very personal kind of purchase, as you probably know. So even something like a gift finder or a fragrance finder, like how do you personalize that to each consumer or each core target group? So there's a lot of different ways that we've been looking at data as well. And then we do a lot of consumer listening. So understanding, again, what are those upticks? What are those moments that we need to like infuse certain language or call to actions, if you will. And again, like really building additional merch offerings as well. What is that scent experience? So there's been a lot of, that kind of, I think, relationship building, if you will, with larger retailers, because they're also accelerating their e-commerce. It's been easy to bridge that gap more. And I think also people are now more and more engaging in like pop-up experiences and whatnot. So we're able to kind of like really explore additional elements outside of just like getting people to go in store. We're able to like create those like unique moments with their partnership, even if it's not in their actual physical store itself. So really kind of looking at things outside the box.
Well, it sounds like a much better dynamic than just arguing over promotion money and shelf space.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think we've all had to like plan for those scenarios because, as I mentioned, like the challenges of supply chain and labor and all of that it's not over. So we do have to plan and allocate budget and plan for various scenarios. And a lot of brands have been doing a really tremendous job with this as well. But from a digital perspective, it's also about, how are you communicating and what are those scenarios look like? Is there an opportunity for you to communicate ahead of time with your consumers? Is there an opportunity to provide additional offerings? If, for example, a shipment is late, how can you do a pre-sale? How can you do a wait list moment? Like being able to like, I think, test those different elements have really helped. And we've also like diversified our media a lot more. I mean, we're a fragrance brand, so we do need to invest in TV, but how do we shift some of those dollars into more agile mediums, right? Like CTV, or accelerate different creator communities with our platform partners like YouTube and of course TikTok. So it's really, I think, looking at a couple of different levers and also testing. And I think because the holiday trends have shifted earlier, we are able to do that a little bit ahead of time, get those learnings, and then retarget, especially doing like the heavy sales, almost promotional time period, if you will, which is where we're going right now.
Now, you mentioned TikTok, which begs my next sort of numbers of questions. The first one is, over the course of the past year, have you seen your segments and audiences change? Has there been any fluidity with your segments or audiences that you've been advertising and marketing to? And my follow-up question to that, only because I've gotten it for the past 3 conversations I've moderated, is are you marketing to millennials in a different way than all your other cohorts?
Yeah, actually, the fragrance that I mentioned that recently launched within the last, it officially launched in August, is called Calvin Klein Defy, and it's really geared towards millennial men, and of course women as a sub target, because we know women shop for men and are gift givers primarily. So that was the first fragrance that Calvin Klein as a brand has invested in and released as a brand new pillar in almost a decade. And we did find a void in the marketplace. And so we're really excited about establishing this new fragrance and product in the marketplace. in terms of diversifying and looking at new ways, I think something that we've done is looking at like tapping into pop culture more. I mean, Calvin, it's not a secret. Calvin has been sort of the foundational brand that has like tapped into all of these elements since the 90s, but gaming is a place that we haven't activated in the past before. And we were the first fragrance brand to do so with a partnership with Twitch. And leveraging the streamer and gamer community that's both male and female. So really, again, goes back to some of that having that authentic conversation, as I meant, and being in areas and places where your audience is and bringing them your brand in an authentic way so you can connect. And that kind of helps build that story and narrative in a much more long-term format than pushing it sort of in a very inauthentic way, because we know a lot of large legacy brands have the opportunity to play in so many different verticals and spaces, but we're really careful about how we do that. And then, sorry, what was your other question?
Have you seen any changes in your segments over the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think also, we've been doing a lot of research, and people aren't in sort of a box anymore too, right? There's a lot more gender fluidity conversations. There's a lot of different spaces that people themselves are playing in, and how they're shopping and who they're shopping from, when they're shopping. Again, holidays is a really great example, right? No one is waiting till November anymore to shop for a holiday. People have purchased some of their holiday, gifts way earlier this year. So like understanding who your targets are, what they're motivated by, and being present in that like continuous evergreen effort is something that we're really focusing on as well.
Very cool. Before we sort of move on, there is a question that came in relative to what you're talking about, and that is, does audio have a role in your marketing?
That's actually a great question. I was going to mention that is something that we are testing as well. And not just, definitely is part of our media strategy, but we're also testing and looking to test from a content creation perspective as well. We've also done some smart sampling through various different platforms like Spotify as well. So it's definitely something we're testing and learning, because it's only going to grow.
Very cool. You guys have a lot of moving parts. It's amazing how much evolution there has been in the marketing and advertising. And it brings a quote to mind from Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I can't help but ask, Nilu, your cultural diversity at Coty, how has that made your team more successful?
Yeah, I think I'm sure for those that are familiar with Coty, there's been a lot of very positive change in the last several months, or even this past year. We have some incredible leaders leading the organization, and I'm very fortunate and thrilled to be part of this transformational time period for the company, and helping to foster a new culture in the organization. And what that really means is diversity can come in all spaces and shapes and forms, right? It's not just about your ethnic background, it's about socioeconomic, it's about your education, it's about where you've grown up, how you think about approaching a role. So I think for me, from a team perspective, that's what I look for when I'm also building a team. I definitely don't look at specific personalities and try to put people in a box. I'm not certainly someone like that. I've grown up in like so many different countries and cultures, and so for me, it's really important to kind of reinforce that diversity of thought. And also, I think when you're looking at, especially building a team and hiring people, sometimes it's really great to test someone that might not have done a certain position
Mm.
because they would approach it in a fresh and new way, and versus someone that's been doing the same thing for like 20 years or have only been in beauty or what have you. So I think there's so many different ways to look at what diversity really means, especially when you're building a team.
That's amazing. Do you have any examples of how diversity of thought, as well as background, has resulted in some unexpectedly positive outcomes?
Of course. I mean, I work on a global team and I work on a global role in a global business, right? So, so I think just being able to understand who your consumers are, not just in your immediate background or in your immediate physical space is so key. And I think that's what fosters and builds sort of a global diverse culture, and being able to understand your colleagues from various different locations, which will then result in smart business decisions as well, right? Because we're creating strategy and a footprint for how the business is going to go globally. So it's not just for the US, it's not just for North America or what have you. So being able to like understand and partner and dissect the trends that would work in APAC or in specific markets in APAC or LATAM or what have you. And so I think, you know, that's really what's made, I think, Calvin Klein business and the brand really successful in general. And it's the DNA of the brand too. It's been, you know, I think the foundational brand for so long to represent all of these kinds of things, right? Diversity, innovation since the 90s. And then also Coty is a company that really strongly believes in that.
Yeah. And how is the Coty leadership, obviously yourself included, what things are they doing to ensure that women and minorities are empowered and are not held back to any new opportunities or promotions?
I think with the new leadership team, especially the new leadership team in place, it's very inherent and very much part of the culture at Coty. You know, I think this past year has definitely put a very heavy focus on how to accelerate and help women and their growth, minorities of course, and you know. It shouldn't have taken us this long to get here, not Coty, but just in general. But we're here now. So, so I think for Coty specifically, you know, we've put in place a women's leadership group. We've put in mentorship, which I think is really incredibly valuable. It's something that I had wanted when I was younger.
Sure.
As well. And because I think one of the challenges you have is you need to grow these leaders from a junior level, because if you don't and invest in their growth, you cannot get to a senior level and expect all of these women or all of these minorities or whatever, you know, however you look at diversity, to suddenly be candidates to be available. And I think also it's about educating the allies within the company too, right? Like, what does diversity and representation mean within the organization and within your teams, and what does it mean to have a diverse leader? It's not just putting a person of color in place, it's putting the right person of color or the right individual to lead the right team. And so I think there's a lot of variation. So it's about education, and that's something that Coty is doing more and more of as well.
Excellent. That's great to hear. It's a question from the audience. Do purpose initiatives play a role in your marketing, for example, DEI, sustainability, et cetera?
Yes. So sustainability from a fragrance standpoint is definitely something that we are continuing to accelerate across the board. It's hugely important to Calvin Klein as a brand, and then also Coty. So for example, one of our fragrances, it's called CK Everyone. It's the first vegan and sustainable fragrance in the industry. And that's a new brand pillar, if you will, that we launched in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. So and we are continuously looking at sourcing ingredients in a sustainable way, our packaging to be sustainable, refilling fragrances. So all of these kinds of initiatives are definitely things that we're working across the board at Coty. And Coty's really been leading the way, which has been fantastic to be a part of. And then also it's helping its brand partners like Calvin to do so as well.
Very cool. You guys have so many exciting things. I can't help but ask what other exciting things are around the corner for Coty and Calvin Klein.
There's obviously a few that I cannot mention, but it's Calvin Klein. So we have some really, really exciting things coming down the pipeline. We're unveiling our holiday campaign really soon in collaboration with fashion. And then of course, as I mentioned, we have our new launch that recently launched. So we have a lot of exciting things coming down the pipeline for support moments within gaming. And as I mentioned, creating more and more conversation with our cultural curators and tapping into the exciting world of social and digital through TikTok and various different virtual experiences as well.
Well, I can't help but ask because PayPal is buying Pinterest. Are you guys engaging in social shopping?
Yes, of course. Social shopping, social commerce. It's. I mean, I think it would be insane if we really weren't tapping into into that, especially as a beauty brand. So yeah, I think Coty also has unveiled a lot of really great exclusive relationships and partnerships as part of the larger corporation, where all of our brands are collectively partaking in those opportunities. We've done so on the Calvin side with various different influencers, our Amazon partners. We're doing a lot of live selling with various different retailer partners as well. As you mentioned, based on our previous conversation, that's something that I think the retail partners have been accelerating on, as they've recognized there is that need and void. And so that's what we've been capitalizing on as well. And then of course, like engaging a little bit in from a social platform perspective and testing and learning with live shopping with the TikToks of the world to better understand what's, pushing the needle and not.
Very cool. Have you guys been taking any toe dips in digital out of home and kind of pushing the envelope on that medium?
Yes. So from out of home, what we like to do is we do, as we're building out our 360 media plan and our support plan, out of home is certainly a huge part of it, just from the billboards, wall postings, to even, as I mentioned, like various different pop-up events. And I think creating those like customized and unique opportunities are something that we're looking to do more and more of, especially now, and connecting that with that digital space, right? Like making sure there are ways for people to activate an experience through either a QR code or what have you, and bringing it back to that digital world and then pushing it through maybe to a retailer or your D2C as well. So really thinking through what that like consumer loop is.
Very cool. Nilo, I think you're an inspiration. Do you have any inspiring words for young women trying to make a career in the marketing and advertising space?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think, it's such a creative and exciting space. So, and for me, that's kind of, what I'm motivated by. So if you're motivated by that, there's never a linear path. So, test things, test different opportunities, brands, verticals, if you will, speak to a lot of people, get inspired, because no journey is the same. And I think also investing in yourself very, very early on. And what that means is, from an education standpoint, on the job training skills, ask for what you want. These are all basic things, but people don't do it enough. Women don't do it enough, and women of color don't do it enough. So, I think these are all really sort of helpful things that I sometimes wish I did a little bit more of when I was younger, and I was, growing up in the industry.
You ever recommend more technical training for marketers, whether it be quantitative work, more advanced statistics or econometrics or coding, or, because everything is so digital, you feel like those technical skills are just good to have for young people to kind of focus on?
Absolutely. I mean, I think now, especially now, I don't think there's a kid that doesn't code anymore, right?
Right.
I think it's a course, a class in your I don't know, kindergarten or whatever. I don't have, I mean, I don't have kids, but that's what I gather from my friends and family. So I think definitely, just because you learn a specific skill, like just because you learn, I mean, everyone needs to be able to manage a P&L or manage, budgets or whatever it is, right? So just because you learn one specific skill, or you want to train to be an art director, it doesn't mean you're confined by that. It just means that that's a strength and skill that you have to use to get wherever you are. And it'll only strengthen your experience and your skill set and your offering that much further. Very
cool. We have our chat box open, so if anybody has any questions, now is the time. I think we only have a few minutes left. Let's see. There's one question here with regards to testing and test and learn. Do you guys have an ongoing sort of rolling in-market experiments going on right now, which seems to be what a lot of companies doing, or are you kind of doing some things a little bit more rigid, more periodical or seasonal testing?
Yeah, it really depends on sort of our objective as well, and how we want to support. Sometimes we do come up with various different pilot programs that are very specific to a launch or very specific to a time period as well. And then other times it's really sort of that evergreen testing moments, as I mentioned, as we're supporting from a content standpoint or a creator, or even through our media investments. So it's really twofold. Got it.
Someone named Stephanie wants to connect with you. Stephanie, I would say go to LinkedIn.
Sure, yeah, please.
The best way to go. Is a question from Judy. What is in your marketing tech stack?
In my marketing, I'm sorry.
Your marketing tech stack.
Oh, well, I mean, we're part of a really large organization. So we have partners that we're confined to working with Coty and with Calvin. So, but every now and then we will reach out to like new partners and kind of try some of those pilots programs, as I mentioned. But yeah, but we work with obviously some of the larger, global partners.
Very cool. That seems to be it for questions. Tyler, how are we doing on time?
Oh, I just went off mute. I think we're good. I mean, to your point, there's only 4 minutes left.
Right.
This has been a great conversation for sure. Neil, I mean, you guys have so many brands at Coty.
Yeah.
How do you guys balance out, or how do you balance your time, like amongst so many amazing, great brands? Is it just budget dictation? How do you balance that?
Yes and no. I mean, we have priorities based on a market level. I mean, even within, for example, even within Calvin Fragrances world, we have 4 big brands or pillars, if you will, and no brand is the same. And there are priorities within those of how we want to support certain launches based on market, based on footprint. So there's a lot of different ways that we prioritize. And then within Coty, I mean, Calvin Klein Fragrance is the largest luxe brand as well, but we do have our consumer beauty section as well, where we have our color brands like CoverGirl and Max Factor. So it really, I think from a prioritization standpoint, it's really on a market level and how we want to grow that business and where we're looking at opportunities. And it's not a secret to say APAC and LATAM are huge focuses right now.
Oh, interesting. APAC, I would have guessed in second. What makes LATAM such a strong push for you?
I think it's where, you know, there is growth in the audiences, right? And where there is economic growth. So you also want to kind of invest your business there. I mean, we just launched in China last October for Calvin Klein fragrances, and now we're really looking to like accelerate that business. So there's a lot of different, I think, you know, pieces that go into that focus.
Right. Are there any crazy products in APAC that we don't have over here, or vice versa? Like, or is it pretty streamlined globally?
There are some collection drops that we do that it's obviously very specific to the APAC market or different markets. I think also it's how you market. You know, we talked about live selling and social commerce. They are much more advanced and it's much more commonplace there. So how you do it is very different than how we're trying to build those kinds of elements from the ground up here. There's a lot more education that needs to happen. There's a lot of testing and learning where it's like very commonplace, and that is how people shop. So your ways of accelerating and approaching it is completely different because they're at an advanced level, and here you're kind of at like that 101 level of trying to build on that. So.
Well, hopefully we can get to 201 soon enough. But no, it's amazing, and you guys touched on a lot of the themes that we're hearing today, which is, you know, being locally focused, heavy in diversity and inclusion.
Oh, you get two amazing people. This is what happens.
Yes, I agree. So I really appreciate you guys spending kind of the lunch break, I guess, for some people with us and sharing your knowledge. And I guess if anybody does want to reach out, I think just hit you up on LinkedIn, because I did see that question that he brought up, and we'll go from there. So thank you guys, and appreciate you guys' time.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks everyone for spending lunch with us.